Welcome to the Following Films podcast, where we go behind the lens with the artists, outsiders, and icons shaping independent film. I'm your host, Chris Maynard, and today's episode is a wild one. I had the chance to sit down with Harley Flanagan, punk pioneer, founding member of the Cro-Mags, and subject of the new feature-length documentary, Harley Flanagan, Wired for Chaos. Directed by Emmy and Peabody award-winning Rex Miller, this no-holds-barred film dives into Harley's life, from the violent streets of 70s New York to the hardcore scene that defined a generation. This isn't just about music, though. It's about survival. Abuse, addiction, squats, street fights, punk gigs, jiu-jitsu, fatherhood, Harley's lived through it all. And the film, which features interviews with Flea, Henry Rollins, Ice-T, Michael Imperioli, and the late Anthony Bourdain, shows a side of himself many haven't seen before. Now, a quick heads up, there's a slight audio issue on my end during this episode. I didn't realize that my mic wasn't plugged in, so you'll hear me through my laptop's onboard mic. It's definitely listenable, but just a bit rougher than usual. But honestly, I guess I could say it fits the vibe of this episode. It's probably a stretch. I should have been more professional and realized it, but here we are. So with that, let's get into it. This is Harley Flanagan. Loud, raw, and real. Hope you enjoy the show. First time I saw the trailer for this film, it opens up with you running with your bass. And I went that night to see some friends of mine play. So I'm a 50-year-old recovering punk rock kid, and I still have friends that play out and do shows. We're still trying to live the dream. And we all saw that trailer the same day, and everybody had the exact same reaction where we said, I thought I loved music. But apparently, I don't give a shit about music. Just seeing you jog with your bass. It's one of those things like, oh, apparently I have no dedication. So.
I'm a little bit psychotic. That actually, why I started doing that. I don't do it all the time. Why I started doing it was because I had few surgeries. I had back surgery, I had elbow surgery and wrist surgery. So I had a lot of recovering I had to do. I actually had to teach my arm and my hand how to work again. I couldn't extend my arm. I could barely use my finger. I couldn't pick up a glass or turn a doorknob. And this is with my left hand, the one that does all the majority of the work. And so I had to do a lot of rehab. And, I'm practicing at home, trying to get my hand back in shape. And then I had a thought, and I'm like, I run around a lot when I play. So walking around my apartment or sitting on the couch and playing is not giving me what I need. I need to work on my cardio as well as my playing while I'm playing. So I took my bass and I went fucking jogging in the park. and I just started doing that until I went on tour,
It sounds surprisingly good, though, because I'm listening to it and what you're playing, and you're on point when you're playing. It's ridiculous.
Well, dude, I run around a lot when I play, so it's really it just made sense, I'm like, I got to have my chops together. I got to be able to play, but I also need the stamina to put on a show. And, I take that shit very serious. I literally exercise I do like an hour of cardio every day because I know that my set sometimes runs about an hour, So I do a minimum of 40 minutes to an hour of cardio every day. And that's besides my, working out, my training and shit. That's a whole separate thing. I train jiu-jitsu and I box and all that shit. But I do the cardio just for the sake of being able to perform. I do like 45 minutes of shadow boxing while I'm doing vocal scales. I mean, it's actually hysterical. If you come backstage, I'm like in the dressing room, shadow boxing, like, because I know I have to be able to project. Yeah. I have to be able to hit notes while my lungs and body are moving. So yeah, I'm a little nuts.
Well, no, but I appreciate that. I really respect that. Incredible.
There's method in my madness.
Well, I think that people that aren't familiar with hardcore music. I think that they would actually appreciate this documentary, this film. Anybody who has felt like an outsider, felt like that there's a separation between you and the world that's around you. That it was at first when I saw that Rex was doing your film, I was really surprised by it. But then to think about it, there's actually a lot more similarity between you and Arthur Ashe than I ever would have thought. The way that you guys were, your sort of early childhood and coming up and being that other and sort of the interloper in this world, it made a lot of sense. And then even within that, the fact that I had no idea you had a DR background, that was part of you. So then it's just, you have all these layers on top of it that are really pretty remarkable. And I'm wondering about the vulnerability of telling a story like this and being open.
Well, people, it's funny because people keep asking about the vulnerability. And honestly, I don't feel like I have any. I mean, if I did, I wouldn't be talking about it.
How do you mean?
If I was so vulnerable, I'd still be keeping it to myself. I think that, talking about things that are, were rough, I think the more you do, the less difficult it becomes for starters, But honestly, I don't think there's anything. I think I'm not patting myself on the back here. I'm speaking in general. Like, I think that if you can talk about things that are painful or difficult, that shows strength. That doesn't show vulnerability.
Well, I think of those words as the same also. Vulnerability is a strength to me.
It is a strength. I mean, I don't know if it's a strength or if it's just a quality, because I mean, I don't know, I guess you'd have to go to Webster's and look up the definition.
and I see what you're saying, but it's the idea that I'm just going to put myself out there. I'm going to open it up. And if the world shoots me down, so be it. Well, it's the being open to the punch.
The world's been shooting at me, in one form or another most of my life, some of it my own fault, some of it my own choice, but, again, man, all I have is, me and I'm an honest person and I'm not really, I know I've done a lot of shitty things and I own that as well, but, you can't fault someone for being victimized. You can't fault someone for having a rough life, or so I don't feel ashamed or vulnerable because I handle my business, and I go on with life, and I didn't let any of these things defeat me. So again, it's not about vulnerability. It's about accountability and about owning it and about accepting things that happen and trying to recover and move on.
That's always the challenge for everybody in different levels. It's like, it's different. The EQ is a little bit different for everybody, where for some folks it's a small thing, but if it's the biggest thing that happened to you, it's not insignificant. And for other people, it's a mountain that you couldn't even possibly comprehend. But then people have a way of getting through it, or that you either get past it or you don't. And
it's and it's all relative too. What can crush one person can seem insignificant to someone else.
And so there's your music, your interest in jiu-jitsu, a lot of the things that you're involved in, that you're passionate about, they involve a lack of comfort, that you have to push yourself, that it's hard, that it's strenuous. And so I feel like a lot of the things there, it's almost an association with pain to some degree, not necessarily emotional pain, but there's a physical thing that's happening with you that's very visceral, it feels like.
I don't know if it's about the pain as much as it is about testing yourself and seeing what you can endure. It's not like you're deriving pleasure from the pain, but you're kind of, and also with jiu-jitsu, at least competitively and training, it's, if anything, you learn humility because you tap when someone submits you. You don't let them break your arm. You try not to get put to sleep, but you fight until you very end, until you literally, they've got you. And it's very humbling to accept, you got me. It's really humbling, and I think it makes you a better person.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Embracing that humility, it seems that's
Yeah,
getting out of your way of your own fucking ego. For me, is one of the
huge.
biggest challenges in life.
It's huge. It's huge, and jiu-jitsu will definitely do that for you. When you get submitted by someone that you look at them and you're like, I'm gonna plow through this dude, and then all of a sudden you're like fighting for your life. It makes you think, but there's definitely an adrenaline pushing thing from both jiu-jitsu and the music that I play. It fills a need for me. I've lived a very intense life, and I think I need that type of release. I also, it probably also has a little to do with my PTSD and whatnot. So I'm always living on. I'm always like pushing myself to. I won't say scary places, but I'm always testing the limits of whatever it is that I'm doing. It's you know, but that's that can also bring you to great heights.
Absolutely. Testing, you don't know until you've pushed it as far as you can. And
Yeah,
oftentimes there's much more in the tank than you think there is.
yeah,
It's that whatever that thing is that gets you over that hump. And whether it's physical, emotional, a intellectual pursuit that you're going after, I think pushing yourself beyond what you think you can do, and then a little one step further than that is so important.
yeah. I mean, sadly, I also did that with drugs. And I
Yeah.
also did it with violence. I mean, just like I was pretty wild when I was a kid, and it was a bad neighborhood. So I don't feel so much like I was the most. I was definitely not the most problematic teenager in my neighborhood. There was nothing but gangs. Um, it was pretty intense. People don't realize what the Lower East Side was like back in the late '70s and '80s, and even the '90s were a little crazy. But yeah, man, I've always, for whatever reason, I mean, there's a million reasons, you could talk about this shit for hours. I ask my therapist. It's like, but there's a reason why I guess crave that. I don't know if it's adrenaline or if it's just like pushing myself. The dopamine that it releases when I'm in an intense situation. I mean, I've been in a more or less a state of fight or flight since before I was even born. So when you're like, when you're in your mom and your dad's beating her ass, you absorb that. When your parents are alcoholics and junkies, you absorb that. When you're surrounded by nothing but adults and they're all fuck ups,
Right.
you absorb that. When you're not like in a kid friendly environment, you grow up too fast. So all these things pushed me to a place in life where, by the time I was 15, I was shooting meth.
Jesus, man.
So, you know, so I mean, my life was definitely pretty intense, and that comes out in my music, and that's why the only sports I'm really into are like combat sports.
Well, there's for me, the thing that always attracted to me to hardcore music and punk rock in general was the catharsis that happens with it. It's that
Mhm.
feeling of, being 14 years old and going to a show and just completely leaving everything there. It was whatever was going on in my daily life, whatever that struggle was that I was having, that it didn't exist in that moment. It was just gone.
You just described jujitsu.
Okay.
You really did. Like you just everything that happened in the rest of your life is gone when you're on the mats.
Hmm.
You are in that moment. And I guess some people would say that's what it's like when you're going through a wave, through a tube, and you're
Sure.
surfing. Some people would say that's what they get from skydiving. It's that push where you're just like it's almost fear, but it's not. Like you're excited, and that in itself is a euphoria. That releases dopamine. That peaks our dopamine. You know, and and that way that you felt as a kid, I feel that way every time I step on stage. And there's a reason that like I say, there's a reason I exercise and work out like a fucking psychotic. It's because I put out like, I don't know if there's anybody alive who works as hard as I do on stage. I'm not saying I'm the best player or the best performer, but I'll tell you this, I sweat more than any fucking buddy out there. I fucking leave it all out there every night, every night, because the shit is real. I'm not out there doing a job. I'm out there fucking screaming my life story, and it's a fucking painful life story. It's a aggressive, violent, full of passion, full of love, full of hate, and all those things get fucking poured out of me every time I'm on fucking stage. Sometimes I get lost in the moment and I start talking between songs about shit that I probably shouldn't be talking about on stage. But a lot of people come up to me and thank me for it at the end of the night. Some people are like, you're fucking fucked up in the head, but whatever. You know what? Yeah. My shit is fucking real, man. You're not getting, this is not a fucking performance. It's I'm like, every night that I'm up there, that's the realest I get, man.
Well, I think that authenticity is the reason that why you still have the career that you do, why you're able to still play. You've been doing this for your entire life at this point. I would assume that you can't, it's hard to remember a time when you were doing this.
I don't remember a time that I was not involved in music on some level, because I literally my mother was taking me to shows when I was a baby. So, if you've seen photos of Jefferson Airplane, I was probably one of those naked kids running around in front of the stage,
Sure.
And I made my first bit of money, my first spare change I made on the street playing music with other kids from my school when I was like 7 years old or whatever. And I've been playing in bars and nightclubs since I was 9 or 10. So, I literally, and this is no bullshit, man. I went to CBGB's the first time in 1973. Okay. I have a video of Hilly Crystal talking about it.
Yeah.
And that was the year they opened. Okay. And I played at CB's at their last show. I played 3 nights there. I think they had one other show, like the last weekend they existed. So literally I was there from the year the club opened until playing at the last weekend. So I think it's fair to say that I probably saw and played more shows at CBGB's than anybody alive or dead. I think that's a pretty fair guess. Literally, if I was there from the first year till the end, I don't think there's anybody else that could say that, I really don't.
You're almost like the Zelig of East Coast punk rock. It was just you were there the whole time. You always had that.
Man. I remember seeing Johnny Thunders stumbling out of the dressing room with a syringe in his arm. And that you don't forget that when you're fucking 11.
I don't think I would have known what that meant at that age.
Well, sadly, I did. Because my dad was a dope fiend, and not that I knew him because my mom split pretty early, but a lot of the people that I hung out with back in those days were dope fiends because they were punk rockers, and everybody was, it was that Sid Vicious era, man. That it was literally that era. Half the people I knew, like half the adults, and when I say adults, I mean people in their early 20s, maybe,
Yeah.
They were all fucking strung out, and half of them were doing, live sex shows in Times Square to support their habits.
Right.
Half the chicks I knew were either prostitutes or strippers, and I didn't even know because I was a kid. What the fuck did I know? I didn't realize that that they were like going in the other room and shooting dope while I was hanging out and doing whatever the fuck I was doing. So, so you grow up fast, you grow up too fast, and I think, the few other young people that I knew who were close to my age, they crashed and burned pretty fucking hard. Yeah. If anything, like I said, that rage that I literally see a therapist about, that was probably what, protected me on a lot of those nights that I was vulnerable before I had the strength. And actually, I guess I was only vulnerable because I was a child and I was small. I definitely had the heart because I'm still here. But a lot of shit happened, man. A lot of bad shit. And but I I don't fucking harp on it like that, because there's always somebody who's had it a lot worse. So who the fuck am I to bitch and moan? I mean, you got, if I would have been born in the wrong part of Africa, I'd been running around with a machete killing people at 8 years old, So,
right.
I think about it. I knew I don't know if you've ever heard of General Butt Naked. He was a warlord in fucking Africa. And
No.
like he had child soldiers and they used to go into battle naked, like all fucked up on drugs.
Jesus.
And they would like hack people up with machetes and do like crazy shit. Like he was in some voodoo shit. And he thought that if he went into battle naked, he couldn't be pierced by bullets. And
Right.
It was crazy shit. So I knew somebody who was one of his child soldiers. Right. And, I listened to this motherfucker tell me shit. And I'm like, boo, like, I didn't go through nothing. So it's all fucking relative.
It is.
And I know people who haven't gone through shit, but they're like crushed by it. Oh, I got divorced. Oh, yeah.
It's
you and fucking everybody else. Oh, this happened. Oh, my God. My dick fell off. Fucking.
Well, I mean, the divorce one, I was with you. Your dick falling off. You have a good reason.
Okay, so some things are a little bit, some things are genuinely.
That's universal. I think even the dude from Africa would be like, "I'm sorry."
Anyway, I'm just trying to make light of the misery of life because if you can't do that, you're fucked.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, what is it? So, like that internal rage that you feel. Most people, it will either that you have that. It's either it consumes you, it protects you, but then it ends up being the thing that ultimately destroys you for
absolutely.
A lot of people.
Yeah, no, I would say even for myself. I mean, that's just it. As my therapist pointed out, and she works at the VA and has for years. Actually, that's how I got her through one of my black belt brothers who's a veteran. I had my own little group of people that I used to like, because once I really started understanding that who hipped me to the idea that I had PTSD was, I don't know if you know Jocko Willink.
Yeah.
Okay, well, when he said to me, he goes, okay, I'm not a therapist, but I know a little bit about PTSD. And I think that without a doubt, there's no question in my mind that you have PTSD. And then he started going down some examples of my life and why that would cause it. Now, being a meathead and, being a guy, I did not even think that PTSD was something that a civilian could claim to have. I was just like, that's something that combat veterans have, because they've like had their friends' brains blown out next to them. That's not some shit that I have. I'm just a miserable fuck. I'm just an unhappy, pissed off fucker. And, when he started breaking it down to me and just really pointing out that, just because you don't see someone die in combat, if you see someone die on the street in front of your building, that doesn't make it less traumatic. If you see someone getting nailed by a bus in front of you instead of getting nailed by a Humvee, why is that less traumatic? And he just started breaking it down. And then I have a few friends of mine that I train with, a few of my black belt buddies who are all vets, and we started talking more and more about it. Like they started opening up to me. I started opening up to them. When I would find myself in situations where my head was starting to really spin, I would get in touch with them and vice versa. And I had put together like a little group of friends that wasn't like we didn't get together and have meetings or whatever, but we were just there for each other.
Right.
It's like the crazy thing is like some of them are combat vets, some of them are like gang members, who've done like many years in prison and who have killed people and had friends killed, guys who've seen real shit, and that they're no less hurt or damaged, just because they fell into crime and this and that doesn't mean they're not human. And, and even some cops have helped me through this. I got a couple friends who were like, homicide detectives, they've seen some things, man.
Yeah.
And they've been through trauma, and I got one friend who's, a Marine who's now a SWAT team member. And it like makes total sense. Like, you go from kicking indoors in combat, now you do it for a living here, it makes sense. Like what else is he going to do? Fucking work at fucking Starbucks? Like, I don't think so,
Right.
So in this process of, putting together a support system for myself, that's really what I was trying to do. Was I was really just trying to, because I was starting to wig out for a while. There was a while that I was really like reliving my trauma. Like I started, I would say, sinking into like alcoholism, even though I didn't realize it, because I was like pounding like fucking half a bottle of vodka a night, just trying to shut my brain off and get to sleep. And it really didn't shut my brain off. It just, all it did was get me to stumble to the bedroom. And there was a few things in particular that were just like replaying in my head over and over and over again. And ironically, it wasn't any of the things that happened to me. It wasn't any of the like, it wasn't getting molested. It wasn't getting stomped. It wasn't getting beat up or stabbed or whatever. It was actually shit that I did to other people in violent situations. And that really tortured me. Oh. Things that I couldn't forgive myself for. Things that I knew were wrong in my soul that I could not justify. I could justify it so many ways. It was because of the situation. It was because of this. It was because of that. This led to this, that, but it doesn't stop the fact that it happened. So that's when I started really bugging. And this was, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. And one of my bros was like, I really think you need to start talking to a therapist, man, because like I can only sit here and talk to you. I can't, you can't learn. Two white belts can't teach each other jiu-jitsu.
Right.
You need a black belt in the room, or somebody who at least understands the fundamentals. And same way, you need somebody who has the knowledge to guide you through it, or if not guide you through it, give you the tools to help you guide yourself. Because obviously a therapist is not going to know your situation. They probably haven't been through, she's not a combat veteran.
Right.
She has not lived in squats. She hasn't robbed people. She hasn't had to shoplift to feed herself. But because she understands about the way the brain works, and she understands about science, and she understands that the reason you go through these dopamine peaks and then fall into heavy duty depressions, and it's chemical. You cannot ride that high forever. So the higher that fucking dopamine fucking high is, you better believe it's going to have an equally hard crash. And the cortisol that gets released in your system, that shit, it does a lot to you. I mean, I still wake up in cold sweats. I have night sweats. And like my wife has seen me attack things in my sleep, like punch shit and bite the pillow. And, fortunately I haven't done that in a while, but like, it's still there. I still have dreams. And there's, times when I don't even want to sleep, but it's getting, it's all getting slowly better. And it is what it is. This is, it's part of the journey, man, and, yeah, man, PTSD is real like a motherfucker, man. That shit is in your system. I mean, I had a real, believe it or not, I'm doing good, but I had a real bad episode even recently where I just like sat there, just, crying in the dark, just sucking wind, was like unable to get rid of the pain I was feeling, even though I'm looking around at my life and I'm like, my life's pretty fucking good, man.
Yeah.
I got a good place to live. I have an amazing wife. My kids are grown and they're back in my life. There was a little while where after me and their mother separated that I was really struggling to get them back in my life. I'm sure a lot of parents know what that's like. And I didn't give up on them, and I didn't give up on trying, even though they were like, it was so hard. My son, who just turned 21, he actually apologized to me recently for having been so rough. And it was beautiful. He was like, I was angry because you weren't in my life and I didn't know how to express it.
Yeah.
And this is a kid who like punched me in my face, like several times. I mean, and the fucking kid's like, he's like 6 foot tall, man. He's a big fucking dude.
Yeah.
And I ate it. And I fucking, I let him get away with it several times because I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want to get in trouble with his mom and not see him again until he was 18. I was like, I got to just suck this up and be there for him and now we're fucking so close. We're so close. So, my life is great, so I'm sitting there and I'm like feeling this pain and that just goes to show, PTSD, it's not just mental. It's also physical,
Yeah.
People say you have muscle memory. That's because your cells, they remember shit too. That's why you actually feel the pain when you're feeling it, but, so yeah, I have those moments from time to time, but I'm also very aware that, of why and, and, um, and I'm always counting my blessings, man. Even on my shitty days, and I have them, I am still very aware of the fact that they are just shitty days and that, they'll be in the rear view mirror. I have chosen to live for the good days and I refuse to give up for the bad ones.
It's the key, isn't it? It's the acceptance of the bad because you'll get through it. It's when you try to drown it and fight against it that it's really dangerous. If you just accept that emotion, recognize it, and feel it,
Well, you
there's
have
a
to
good chance of
recognize
moving.
it. Yeah. Yeah. If you recognize it, it actually is a little, I don't want to say easier, but it puts things in a perspective. And that's why
Sure.
it's really important. It's critical to understand the chemicals and the way the brain works so that you don't get so fucking eaten alive by whatever it is that's eating you. That's like, when I lost Anthony Bourdain, it fucking broke my heart, man. And it still fucking hurts. And I always just say, man, if you would have just fucking made it through another couple hours, you might have made it through the night. And, I think about Chris Cornell. I didn't know him personally,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I understand. I don't understand their level of fame or anything like that, but I understand what it's like to be on stage in front of enormous crowds and everybody's like screaming and everybody's feeling it. And you're like almost like you're like a fucking receptor for all of this energy. And at the same time, you're putting it out.
Hmm.
You're putting out all this energy and all of these people are throwing it back to you. And it's so fucking intense. So intense. It's actually, you can't even explain it to someone who hasn't felt it. And then and now imagine doing this night after night after night after night after night after fucking night after night to the point where you don't know what the fuck is going on anymore.
Sure.
You're either in a vehicle driving somewhere for fucking 6 to 8 hours, or you're on stage rocking out like some kind of imaginary god, like people are like fucking like worshiping you for a
Yeah.
fucking goddamn minute there. And then you return to the silence of your fucking mind and your hotel room. And the only thing that you have is the ringing in your ears and the
Hmm.
fucking loneliness. And then you start fucking caving in because you don't understand why you can be so unhappy when your life is so amazing. And you just don't understand. And you think there's something wrong with me, And it's like, no, man, what you're going through is intense. And the fact that you're feeling this actually makes you human because this is not normal. So you got to take a step back and fucking say, yo, my dopamine was just at like 1,000. It wasn't at 100. It wasn't at 10, which is probably where your average human gets. It was at a fucking 1,001.
Yeah.
And now you're by yourself and you have to deal with it. And you have to deal with all the thoughts you have. That shit's not fucking easy, man. And again, if people just knew a little bit more about, the way the brain works and how it affects you physically. You know, cortisol fucking affects you physically, man. It does a lot to you, man. All these chemicals do. I mean, it makes me have night sweats. It makes my body hurt. You know, my arms, I wake up sometimes like in pain because of the stress that I have in my dreams sometimes. You know, because there's a lot of things, there's obviously a lot of still unresolved shit in there. You know?
Well, that's the journey that we all have in life. It's the knowing that we'll never be complete. We'll probably never fully get to the other side of that and be fully self-actualized. It's just every day, hopefully it gets a little bit better.
That's the goal, you know. I mean, the goal for me is to keep growing, keep learning, keep improving. And I want to keep improving till the day I shit the bed. You know, because it's like, you know, I figure if you're on a path, as long as you're moving forward at the time of death, that's where your consciousness is at. You know, you're going to be still trying to be positive, still trying to be good. Hopefully by that point, you've learned how to like lead with love and actually love. Because if you can die with that, then you're probably a lot better off. I would imagine that's a much more heavenly state than dying in fear or dying with regret.
Yeah.
Or dying in just with nothing but agony. So, you know, not to get all whatever, but like, you know, some of the Hindu stuff that I read in my, you know, life said that, you know, your consciousness at the time of death determines what type of a body you will take in your next life or what type of afterlife you're going to experience. And I think there is some kind of truth to that, because even if you don't take another shape or form, if that last moment is the last thing that is your last memory, if that's the star in the universe that has your mark on it, you want it to be one of peace. You want to feel love. You want to feel peace.
That's it. I mean, whatever this life happens to be, and what happens once the lights get turned out, leaving it with love and tranquility in your heart. That's
it. Then you kind of won.
Mission accomplished. Yeah,
for real, man.
You got it.
But, yeah, man.
Dude, the movie is something that I found deeply personal and moving, and I think this is a movie that you can recommend. I can recommend very easily to people who have no interest or in punk rock, don't care about this music. They don't know anything about hardcore, because your story is transcendent. And I think a lot of people will get a lot out of this film, man. So thank you for this conversation, and thank you for making the film, man. I really appreciate it.
You know, I'll just add to what you said, and just for those of you who don't care about punk rock or hardcore and don't know or care who I am, that's all cool. A lot of people have seen this film who come from all different walks of life, and some of them don't know anything about my music. Some of them don't know my history. And one thing that has been pretty consistent, everybody felt something in this film that they could connect to.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we've all been through trauma. You know, everybody's lost somebody they love. Everybody's had a rough time in either their childhood or their adult life. Everybody's gone through rough things, you know. So therefore, I think anybody can relate to this film, because I've been through all of it, just in my own way. And the fact that I'm still walking the earth and still, you know, quite productive. You know, I'm flying to Europe on Monday to do a bunch of festivals, and then I get home and I literally I get out of the airplane, I drop my bags off, and I go to a premiere for the film. And then I'm doing like a movie run. Or, you know, the film's playing in LA. It's starting in New York at the Roxy Cinema.
Yep.
Then I'm flying to LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Philly, Boston, Seattle, Portland, Minneapolis, Austin. And I'm just like, I'm all over the fucking place. And then I go back on tour with the band. Oh yeah. And I have some shows in LA right before the premiere out there. So, I mean, I did like over 100 shows last year. The year before, I did over 200 shows. You know, I am pumped, man. I am so, you know, like I said, you can go through hell, but as long as you keep going, you will get to the other side. just don't stop there, sit down and fucking lament. Just fucking keep moving.
Keep moving.
Pushing, man. You know, what was it? Finding Nemo? Was that?
Just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming. Swim, motherfucker. Swim. Keep going. If you're in a bad place, keep fucking going. Don't fucking sit there and cry on yourself. Keep fucking moving.
I love your version of Finding Nemo. Rewrite. Swim, motherfucker. I like that version.
Obviously, I'm a parent. You know what I'm saying? I saw that shit when it came out.
Dude, that's great, man. Dude, Harley, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate this.
Hey,
and congratulations, you got a special one here, man. And thank you for sharing your story.
I appreciate it, man. Everybody out there, just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming, motherfucker.
Yeah. Have a great one, bro.
Take care, brother. Thank you.
Time enough to figure you out. Time enough to write this down. Wish me luck, give me hope. So I fall one more time, and I'll say I can't save you. Fell down into the bathroom, fade out into the background. Get up and fall down again. So what? I know you'll give up. Why can't you prove me wrong? There's just too much time. Why can't you prove me wrong? No way to make you mine. Why can't you prove me wrong? Nothing for each other. You'll be fine. Once more waking up face down. Two lives never to connect. You can't live there. Blocked out, shut up. So I fall one more time, and I'll say I can't save you. Why can't you prove me wrong? There's just too much time. Why can't you prove me wrong? No way to make you mine. Why can't you prove me wrong? Nothing for each other. You'll be fine. Save you now. Save you. Save you now. Save you. Save you now. Save you. My voice cracked.